From 1976, when I went to the first of the national political conventions, until 2016, I went to a total of 19, and I did not go to the 2020s and the 2024s. It got a little stale for me and a little bit, quite honestly, too restrictive. You really couldn't cover what you wanted to cover, and those restrictions began after the 2000 conventions and were heavily affected by the events of 2001 and the World Trade Center and attacks and all that. And your security got really skittish, and perhaps rightfully so. That was not the case in 1980 when the Republicans met and nominated Ronald Reagan in July of 1980 in Detroit. And then the Democrats came back a few weeks later in August, and they nominated President Jimmy Carter for a second term. Now, later on, these conventions, early on, they gave you, if you were covering these things, about 2 to 3 weeks in between the Republicans and Democrats. But when we got to Denver and St. Paul in 2018, the Democrats' convention ended in Denver on Friday, and the press party in Minneapolis, St. Paul, really in Minneapolis, but the convention was held in St. Paul, began the next day. And so the networks and everybody else had to scramble around and actually double their equipment. They had to be ready to go in St. Paul, and they couldn't really use all the equipment that they had up in Citizen. That was a mess, a simple mess. But that wasn't the case in 1980, which was basically pretty leisurely. You went over to the Republican Detroit and went home, took a bath, washed the laundry, clip-clopped around for a few weeks, and then went to New York City. And as in New York, by 1980, the Senate Press Gallery was now credentialing me as a daily newspaper. And I was using some friends' credential, their daily. Mine was not a daily yet. And that was really the best thing to do. So they provided me with workspace just off the podium, right next to the podium, and I had a desk area, and I could take my pictures, and I could look around and all that kind of business. But also, just kind of the free run of the place. And it was very much, this being 2 decades before 9/11, security was not relaxed, but it wasn't anal. And so you had your credentials, you looked like a Christmas tree, you had the access to the hall, you had the floor pass, you had all these kind of things. And it was held, as all of the national political conventions that I've attended, there have been 3 of them in New York now. They were all held at Madison Square Garden, which is down on 34th Street, maybe a little bit further south in New York City. So anyway, off I go, and it was pretty clear by the time we got to the convention. Teddy Kennedy, Theodore Kennedy, Senator Kennedy, John Kennedy's and Robert Kennedy's younger brother, had made a run at Jimmy Carter to take the nomination away. And very difficult thing, if not impossible to do, take away from a sitting president the nomination. Reagan had failed to do that in 1976, to take the nomination away from Ford. And Ted Kennedy tried to do the same to Jimmy Carter. The problem with Ted Kennedy was he had some years before gone partying up in New England and had dumped his car upside down with a young woman named Mary Jo Kopechne and killed her. and then he walked away, and then he had all kinds of reasons why he was not responsible and so forth. But he was not an honorable guy, and when and he got a pass on that from the press until he decided, I am presidential material. Well, Ted, you're not. And anyway, so that reality was becoming clear to Senator Kennedy by the time we reached New York in, I think it was about mid-August of 1980. And I got wind. I was on the floor covering something, listening to something. I don't know. But the press had working space across the street in the old Hotel Pennsylvania on one side, and I think we were at that time, but I know we were later, in the post office on the opposite side of Madison Square Garden, which took up an entire city block. And you hang out with guys and you talk, and those conventions were 24/7. You just go and go and go, and really. But you run into people and know people, and this story I'm going to tell you about McDonald's of all things. McDonald's was on the corner across from Madison Square Garden, and I was sitting there one day eating my gumbo, my burger, right? And you could look out at the glass, and you could look out across Madison. You could see all this kind of stuff. A couple of well-known reporters from, I think one was from the Post, Washington Post, maybe another was from the New York Times, Cleveland or somewhere. Anyway, we're sitting there. We get to watching the door of this McDonald's, and there's a shabby-looking guy standing there, and you open the door for it, close it. I mean, this guy's acting as doorman at McDonald's. Now there's a good career choice for you if there ever was. Okay, you're going to be, or you look like you're homeless, you look like you slept in a culvert last night, and now here you are, a doorman at McDonald's. And the more we watch this guy, the more I realize, at least, this guy is doing a really bad job at looking like a homeless guy. There's something wrong with this guy. And so I saunter up to him, and he kind of opens the door for me, and I said, are you Secret Service, or are you on the presidential detail? I said, I'm Secret Service. I said, got it. In other words, he was security. He said, you got a gun? Who doesn't have a gun? On those guys. And I said, are you alone? And he said, God, no. He said, there are 9 people around here, and we're all in, some of us are in drag, some are, we're all undercover. No one would ever figure out, that I as a doorman. Anyway, so the point of this is that you spend time with other members of the press and you kind of watch things and so forth and so on. And that leads to this story. I'm on the floor. It's Monday night, on the floor of the convention, Monday night. And don't ask me how I find out, because I don't remember, but I find out that Teddy Kennedy is going to pull out of the race, make an announcement down at the Waldorf Astoria, which is about 20 blocks away or so. And he's going to do it pretty darn quick. And somebody told me, I found out somehow. But anyway, I get out of there. I can't, taking the subway or a taxi or anything, I run the 20 blocks from Madison Square Garden up to the Waldorf, and I'm running into the lobby. I got no idea where Kennedy is going to be pulling out of this race. Waldorf has got Twin Towers. It's a pretty big place. I have no idea where it's going to be. And as I'm running across the lobby, I see a woman that I know, this young woman, kind of said hello to one another. And I yell at her because here she is. And I figure she is going where I'm going. So I yell at her, "What room?" And she replies, "I'm in room," and gives me her room number. I'm thinking, well, that's really interesting. I filed that one away. But I go on upstairs, and there's only 2 or 3 or 4 of us there, and they make the announcement. Ted's gone. He's going to pull out. He's, well, is he going to endorse Jimmy Carter? Well, I have to get around to that. If. And they're just dumping all these campaign materials. They've got a box of buttons and take what you want. So I grab a whole bunch of these Ted Kennedy for President buttons, which today would be going for, I don't know, $2, $3, $5 a piece. And I got them. Only I don't know where I got them. They're around here somewhere. I swear, I keep offering these to people, and they keep saying, well, yes, I'd really love to have one. Yeah, well, I'd love to know where I put them, but I don't know. So it's a done deal. The last night of the convention, as I often did, I went up to the back row as far away as I could get from the podium. And I'm sitting up on the back row with party functionaries who are from places like Keokuk and outside Denver, I mean, all over the country, who's one night they've got given a ticket and they can come in and they can be. And this is kind of the night you want to see, because Jimmy Carter's going to make his acceptance speech and it's going to be all over. And so I'm sitting in the back row and I'm saying to these guys, well, how are you, how do you rate the president's chances of being reelected? They said, we're not going to support him. No, the way he treated Kennedy, and the way he's governed and so forth. No. And I'm saying to myself, this guy is dead man walking, because these are the people out in the precincts and in the local levels who make it happen if you're going to get elected. And they were not they were not enthusiastic about President Carter. But what happened next was one of the two most shocking things I've ever seen happen at the convention. And number one was in 2016, where at the Democratic convention, somebody from the podium mentioned Hillary Clinton's name, and the entire Democratic convention booed and booed and booed and booed Hillary Clinton's name. And you go, oh, she got power. But the number one thing is what happened on the podium that night. And this is always after the speeches, when all the balloons are coming down and so forth. They all lock arms, and it's kumbaya, and we're all friendly and we're going forward. And when Jimmy Carter motioned for Ted Kennedy to come over and raise his arm, Ted Kennedy looked the other way. So Carter went over, and now, around the podium about several times, Jimmy Carter is trying to catch up with Ted Kennedy to get a photograph of he and Ted Kennedy. I don't recall that he ever got it, but he may have. Well, was that my stomach? What was that? Oh, okay. We've had an event here. Okay. I'm looking at Rebecca. She says it's okay. I'm getting under the table myself. The result of that election was really an interesting election, because on Thursday or Friday, as we went into the November election, Carter and Ronald Reagan were running virtually together. It was a virtual tie. And as happens on Thursdays and Fridays in elections before the election day, back when people were all voting on election day versus sending in their ballots months and weeks in advance, used to happen is the electorate would make up its mind. We're going to be for this guy. And the electorate made up their mind to go for Reagan, and Reagan won by a very comfortable amount in 1980, and he won 49 of 50 states when he ran again in 1984, and he could have won the 50th, but he was running against, Mondale that year, and he decided not to embarrass Mondale by carrying Mondale State. So that was kind of how that all played out, and there would be big changes between the convention in 1980 and the next time I came back to New York. for a convention, which I think was blah, 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 maybe in 92. And then again, I think we were there in 04. But at that time, people who would come out and in a kind of a lovely, involved sort of way and demonstrate were friendly and full of fun and so forth. They'd bring their babies and they'd bring things, and they'd dress up like Uncle Sam, And I would always walk out among them, and usually they had a little demonstration parade which went up, past Madison Square Garden with all these sort of people. And I would not stand on side. I would get out and walk with them in the parade and talk to these folks. And it was very reassuring about how much these people love the country, were tolerant of different views, and lack the anger and kind of rancor that we are working our way through, hopefully quickly, but we are in the middle of in our country today. So anyway, that's it on the 1980 convention, and we probably will be back doing something more on Hollywood soon. Of course, we're going to go through every convention, 84, 88, 92. I didn't go to the 96 ones. No, we'll get into why, but I was back in 2000, 2004, 2008, 2016. So, I'm supposed to ask everybody to subscribe. I'm talking to you. Right down there, subscribe, because we're almost there in terms of how many we need to subscribe before I become a big deal.